The silence in Dean Finch's office was colder than any walk-in freezer I'd ever stepped into. Then he slid my termination letter across his polished mahogany desk, the one I'd personally ensured gleamed every morning before my classes. I'm Anna Vance. For 6 incredible years, I wasn't just a pastry chef or an instructor at the Crestwood Academy. I was the architect of its entire acclaimed pastry program, the name whispered with respect in our city's culinary circles. I poured my heart into every brioche, every perfectly tempered chocolate, believing that dedication as pure as spun sugar would inevitably be cherished. I learned, the hard way, that loyalty, when unreciprocated, curdles into a bitter sort of self-betrayal. He thought he was simply discarding an ingredient that had passed its prime. He had no idea he'd just handed me the catalyst for a recipe far grander and infinitely sweeter than anything the Crestwood could ever conceive. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those crisp April days where the sun promises warmth, but the air still holds a winter chill. I was in the middle of prepping for my advanced laminated doughs class, the scent of butter and yeast just beginning to fill the teaching kitchen, when Mrs. Gable, our receptionist, appeared at the doorway, her expression unusually tight. "Anna, Dean Finch would like to see you in his office, now." That "now" hung in the air, heavy and out of place. Dean Finch wasn't one for impromptu meetings, especially not at 9 a.m. A knot formed in my stomach, a cold premonition that something was off. His office, as always, was immaculate but imposing. Dark wood, leather-bound books that looked like they'd never been opened, and that enormous mahogany desk that served more as a barrier than a workspace. He didn't ask me to sit. He just stared at me, his face a mask of something I couldn't quite decipher. Disappointment? No, it was colder than that, almost satisfaction. "Anna," he began, his voice devoid of its usual forced congeniality, "it has come to my attention that you've been exploring other opportunities." My mind raced. Exploring? I'd given a guest lecture at Artisan Table Collective a few weeks ago, a sort of professional sharing session on modern pastry techniques. Marcus Thorne, their CEO, had invited me. It was hardly a job interview. Or had it been? "Dean Finch, I'm not sure I understand." "Don't play coy, Anna." He tapped a printed email on his desk. I couldn't see the content, only the stark black letters on white paper. "We have confirmation you interviewed with Artisan Table Collective last Thursday. You took a half-day claiming a dental appointment, I believe." The accusation hung there, sharp and unfair. I had indeed taken a half-day. My goddaughter, Lily, Chloe's daughter, was interested in culinary arts, and I'd arranged for her to sit in on a beginner's workshop at Artisan Table as a sort of trial, a birthday gift. I'd stayed for a bit, chatted with their head of HR about their training programs, more out of professional curiosity, and to help Lily feel comfortable than anything else. It was networking, a common practice in our industry. "That was hardly an interview, Dean," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my hands were starting to tremble. "I was accompanying my goddaughter." He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "The details are irrelevant. Your actions demonstrate a clear lack of loyalty to the Crestwood Academy. After everything we've done for you." Everything they'd done for me? The word stung. I thought of the countless unpaid overtime hours, the weekends spent perfecting new curricula, the reputation I'd single-handedly built for their pastry program. "Therefore," he continued, his voice like ice, "we've decided that your employment with the Crestwood Academy is terminated, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. Terminated, just like that. 6 years of dedication wiped away in a sentence. "Security will escort you to your station to collect your personal belongings. Your building access has been revoked, and your email account is already disabled." He slid my ID badge across the desk. It skittered to a stop near the edge, a small plastic rectangle that suddenly represented so much more than just access. It represented my identity, my passion, my life for the past 6 years. I stood there, speechless for a moment, the shock warring with a rising tide of anger and disbelief. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders. "I understand," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. He looked almost disappointed by my composure. Perhaps he'd expected tears, pleading. I didn't offer any. Walking back to my small office, the one tucked away near the kitchens with a stoic security guard hovering a few feet behind me, was the longest walk of my life. My heart ached. Mrs. Gable looked up as I passed the reception desk, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and pity. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, a silent message of support that I clung to. My office, my sanctuary, felt alien. I started packing. My worn copies of Escoffier and Hermé, notebooks filled with 6 years of recipe development, scribbled notes, stained pages, ideas half-formed, a small collection of quirky cookie cutters gifted by students, a framed photo of my first graduating class, all beaming smiles and chef's whites. Each item was a memory, a piece of my heart. A few of my students, on their way to class, saw me. Their faces registered confusion, then concern. One of them, young Michael, who'd shown such promise with his macarons, stepped forward. "Chef Anna, is everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, Michael. Just a change of plans." I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth, not like this. The cardboard box felt impossibly heavy as I carried it out of those familiar double doors for the last time. The April sun, which had seemed so promising earlier, now felt mocking on my face. 6 years. 6 years of my life reduced to the contents of a single box. The knot in my stomach tightened. It wasn't just the injustice, it was the sheer, cold brutality of it. The bitter aftertaste of betrayal was all I could taste. Driving home, the box of my professional life sitting in the passenger seat felt like a lead weight. My apartment, usually a haven of calm, felt stark and empty. I placed the box on my kitchen counter and just stared at it. The reality was sinking in, layer by painful layer. Unemployed. After everything. My mind replayed Dean Finch's words. After everything we've done for you? What had they done, really? Provided a platform, yes, but I had taken that platform and built a cathedral on it. I sank onto a kitchen stool, the silence of the apartment amplifying the turmoil in my head. 6 years ago, I'd arrived at the Crestwood full of fire and ideas. The pastry program was an afterthought then. Outdated curriculum, uninspired instructors, dwindling enrollment. Dean Finch had hired me, I suspect, because I was young, eager, and probably cheaper than a more established name. He'd given me a shoestring budget and a mountain of expectations, and I had delivered. Oh, how I had delivered. I remembered the late nights poring over textbooks, developing new courses from scratch, then from classic French patisserie to contemporary plated desserts. I'd networked tirelessly, bringing in guest chefs, forging connections with local suppliers for the best ingredients. I'd mentored students with a passion that surprised even myself, pushing them, inspiring them, celebrating their successes as if they were my own. Within 2 years, enrollment in the pastry program had tripled. Our students started winning regional and even national competitions. The Crestwood's name, once whispered only in connection to its somewhat stuffy, savory program, began to be associated with cutting-edge pastry. The revenue from my department? It had soared, a fact Dean Finch was always quick to highlight in board meetings, conveniently forgetting to mention the meager resources he allocated to achieve it. 3 times. 3 separate, meticulously prepared proposals I had presented to him. The first, after we'd won the Best Up-and-Coming Pastry Program award from a major culinary magazine. I'd asked for a modest budget increase to upgrade our ancient mixers and proofing cabinet, and for a small raise that would at least bring me closer to the industry average for my position. "Anna, my dear," he'd said, with that practiced look of regret, "it's just not in the budget this year. A tough year, you understand, but your contribution is noted, truly noted." The second time was after I'd single-handedly developed and launched a series of weekend workshops for amateur bakers that sold out months in advance, bringing in a new stream of revenue. I'd asked for a teaching assistant. The workload was becoming unsustainable, and I was worried about burnout, about the quality of instruction suffering. "Next year, Anna," he'd promised. "We just need to tighten our belts a little longer. Expansion plans, you see." Meanwhile, he'd arrived at work in a brand new luxury SUV, and the academy had leased an additional floor in the building. The third denial, the one that had truly broken something in me, was just 6 months ago. I'd successfully negotiated a partnership with a prestigious local hotel chain to supply all their high-end dessert offerings, a deal worth a significant percentage of the academy's new business. I'd presented market data, salary comparisons, a clear case for why my compensation and the department's resources needed to reflect its value. "Your performance is exceptional, Anna, truly," he'd said, almost paternally. "But we're investing heavily in infrastructure this year. Perhaps we can revisit this in the summer." Infrastructure, I'd wanted to scream. My kitchen was infrastructure. My talent, my team, that was the infrastructure that was bringing in the students and the accolades. That night, for the first time in 6 years, I'd updated my resume. Not out of anger, not then, but out of a dawning, painful realization. I was worth more. I deserved to be valued, not just with words, but with tangible recognition. I never intended to actively job hunt immediately. It was more an act of self-preservation, of acknowledging my own worth to myself. I certainly never expected Dean Finch to discover any inkling of it and react with such punitive force. My phone buzzed on the counter, startling me out of my reverie. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Anna Vance?" A warm, confident male voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Anna, it's Marcus Thorne from Artisan Table Collective. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Marcus Thorne. My mind flashed back to that guest lecture, his insightful questions, his genuine enthusiasm for my ideas. "Mr. Thorne." "No, not at all," I lied, trying to sound composed. "Good. Listen, Anna, I was so impressed with our conversation a few weeks ago, and frankly, your reputation precedes you. I know this is sudden, but would you be free to come in and chat with us? Perhaps even today? I'd like to accelerate our conversation if you're open to it." Accelerate our conversation? My heart gave a strange little leap. After the morning I'd had, this felt like a lifeline, or perhaps a very different kind of current. I told Marcus Thorne I could be there at 2 p.m. The thought of stepping into another professional environment so soon after the morning's humiliation was daunting, but also strangely energizing. What did I have to lose? I certainly wasn't going back to the Crestwood. I showered, changed into my best suit, the navy one I reserved for important presentations, the one that always made me feel a little more powerful. As I applied my makeup, I looked at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't defeated. She was processing. Yes, that was the word. Processing a shock, a betrayal, but also maybe a new, unexpected path opening up. Artisan Table Collective's headquarters were downtown, in one of those gleaming new buildings, all glass and steel. It was a world away from the Crestwood's fusty old-world charm, which now, in retrospect, felt more like old-world stagnation. The lobby was bright, airy, filled with plants and modern art. There was a buzz, an energy that was palpable. Marcus Thorne met me himself at the elevator. He was in his late 40s, early 50s maybe, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Anna, thank you for coming on such short notice," he said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm, welcoming. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Thorne. It's been an eventful day," I said, opting for understatement. "Please call me Marcus." He led me through an open-plan office. People were collaborating in comfortable-looking pods. Some were typing away at sleek standing desks. Natural light flooded in from a wall of windows overlooking the city. Several people smiled or nodded as we passed. A few I vaguely recognized from industry events. It felt vibrant, alive. His office wasn't the imposing fortress Dean Finch favored. It was smaller, more functional, with a comfortable seating area arranged for conversation, not intimidation. He offered me coffee, and we settled onto a small sofa and armchair. "So, Anna," he began, getting straight to the point after some initial pleasantries. "I won't beat around the bush. We at Artisan Table are expanding rapidly. We're known for our savory food, our coffee, our breads, but our pastry offerings, frankly, are not yet at the same level. We want to change that. We want to build a pastry program that's not just good, but exceptional, destination-worthy." He paused, looking at me intently. "I followed your career for a while, Anna. What you did at the Crestwood, transforming their program from practically nothing into a nationally recognized force, that was remarkable. Your creativity, your standards, your ability to inspire students, it's exactly what we're looking for." I listened, a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. To be seen, to have my work acknowledged so clearly, it was a balm to the wound Dean Finch had inflicted that morning. "We're looking for someone to lead that charge," Marcus continued. "Someone with vision, with passion, with the highest level of skill. We're envisioning a role, Director of Pastry Innovation and Development. You'd have autonomy, resources, a team to build. You'd be responsible for creating our entire signature pastry line, for setting the standards, for training, for R&D. Essentially, you'd be the heart and soul of Artisan Table's pastry future. My breath caught. This wasn't just a job. It was a dream opportunity. The kind of role I'd secretly fantasized about but never thought would actually materialize. Certainly not like this. Not today. He named a salary figure that was nearly double what I'd been making at the Crestwood, more than I would have even dared to ask for in my most ambitious proposal to Dean Finch. He outlined a benefits package, stock options, a budget for research and development that made my head spin. "This is incredibly generous, Marcus," I managed, my voice a little shaky. "It's what your talent and experience command, Anna," he said simply. "We believe in investing in the best, and we believe you're the best." He slid a folder across the coffee table. "This is a formal offer. Take your time, look it over. No pressure. But I hope you'll consider it seriously. We're very excited about the possibility of you joining our team." I picked up the folder, my fingers trembling slightly. Overwhelmed didn't even begin to cover it. Valued, that's how I felt. Truly, deeply valued, for the first time in a very long time. I told him I would review it carefully and give him an answer by the next day, though in my heart, the answer was already a resounding yes. Walking out of the Artisan Table Collective building, the city lights were beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. The air felt different now, charged with possibility. That morning, a door had been slammed in my face. This afternoon, a magnificent new one had just been thrown wide open. The offer letter sat on my kitchen table that evening, a tangible symbol of a future I hadn't dared to imagine just 12 hours earlier. I'd called Chloe, my best friend, as soon as I got home. Her reaction was a predictable shriek of delight, followed by a string of rather uncharitable comments about Dean Finch that made me laugh despite myself. "Karma, Anna, karma," she'd crowed. "He has no idea what he's done, the fool." News, it seemed, traveled fast in the tight-knit culinary community of our city. Liam, Chloe's boyfriend, who worked in IT at the Crestwood, had apparently texted her the moment he'd heard I'd been escorted out. Chloe said the rumor mill was already in overdrive. Dean Finch, according to Liam, had called an emergency staff meeting shortly after I'd left. He'd apparently painted me as disloyal, a cautionary tale, emphasizing that the Crestwood valued unwavering commitment above all else. The irony, Chloe said, was palpable to everyone in that room, who knew even a fraction of what I'd contributed. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Anna? This is Genevieve Ainsworth, chair of the Crestwood's board. I've just been made aware of this morning's events. I am very concerned. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning to discuss this? I believe Dean Finch may have acted hastily." Genevieve Ainsworth. I knew the name, of course. She was a prominent alumna, a wealthy benefactor, a powerful figure who usually operated behind the scenes. Her direct intervention was significant. My stomach tightened. What did this mean? A sudden pang of conscience from the board? Or something else? I texted back, polite but cautious. "Mrs. Ainsworth, thank you for reaching out. I would be available to meet." She replied almost immediately, suggesting 9 a.m. at the academy. My mind raced. Were they having second thoughts? Had someone, perhaps a board member more attuned to the actual value I brought, pointed out the recklessness of Finch's decision? Or was this about Artisan Table Collective? The Crestwood had been trying to woo them for months, hoping for a lucrative partnership, perhaps a corporate training program or a consultancy deal to help Artisan Table develop a small, in-house bakery concept for their cafes. If word got out that their star pastry chef, the one whose reputation likely attracted Artisan Table's initial interest, had been unceremoniously fired, well, that wouldn't look good. At all. I spent a restless night. Part of me, the part that was still bruised and aching from the morning's betrayal, felt a flicker of something. Vindication? Not quite. More like a grim curiosity. What would they say? What could they possibly offer that would make me even consider going back to that environment of disrespect and broken promises? The other part of me, the part that was holding Marcus Thorne's incredible offer in my hand, knew that chapter was closed. But perhaps there was a conversation to be had. Not for them, but for me, a chance for closure. The next morning, as I dressed for the meeting with Mrs. Ainsworth, I chose my outfit carefully. Not the power suit I'd worn to Artisan Table, but something understated, professional, elegant. I wasn't going there as a supplicant, nor as a victor. I was going as Anna Vance, a professional, a woman who knew her worth. The Crestwood felt different as I walked in, no longer an employee, but a visitor. Mrs. Gable at the front desk looked up, her eyes widening slightly before her professional smile clicked into place. "Miss Vance, for Mrs. Ainsworth, I presume?" she said, a little too brightly. "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Gable." "I'll let her know you're here." She paused, then lowered her voice. "For what it's worth, Anna, everyone thinks this is terribly wrong. You deserved so much better." Her quiet words of support meant more than she could know. "Thank you, Mrs. Gable. That means a lot." Genevieve Ainsworth met me in one of the smaller, more private board meeting rooms, not Dean Finch's office, thankfully. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed, with an air of quiet authority that Finch, for all his bluster, could never quite achieve. Dean Finch was conspicuously absent. "Ms. Vance, thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, her tone polite, almost gentle. "Please, sit." She didn't waste time with small talk. "I've reviewed your personnel file, Anna. May I call you Anna?" I nodded. 6 years of stellar performance reviews, consistent, remarkable growth in the pastry program's enrollment and reputation, 3 formal requests for salary adjustment and resource allocation, all inadequately addressed, it seems. She looked at me directly. I confess, I was not fully aware of this pattern. The board, generally, is not involved in day-to-day compensation decisions unless they are at the very highest executive level. Dean Finch has been operating with significant autonomy in these matters. Her expression remained neutral, but there was an undertone of disapproval in her voice that was unmistakable. "I see," I said simply. "What I don't see," she continued, tapping the file, "is any formal disciplinary record. No warnings, no performance issues documented, and frankly, no company policy that explicitly prohibits an employee from exploring other avenues, as Dean Finch put it. The grounds for your summary dismissal yesterday appear tenuous, at best." I waited. "Anna," she said, leaning forward slightly, "the board is not pleased with how this was handled. Dean Finch overstepped. We value your contributions to the Crestwood immensely." The words, so longed for, now sounded hollow, too little, too late. "To that end," she continued, "the board would like to make you an offer. We would like to offer you reinstatement, effective immediately, with the full salary adjustment you requested in your last proposal, plus an additional 10% increase. And we would create a new title for you, Distinguished Chair of Pastry Arts, with oversight of curriculum development and a significantly increased departmental budget for equipment and staffing." It was, I had to admit, a tempting offer on paper, more than I'd ever asked for, the kind of recognition I had craved for years. But it came tainted with the knowledge of why it was being offered now. Not because they suddenly saw my intrinsic worth, but because they were scared. Scared of losing face, scared of losing a potential cash cow like Artisan Table. "That is a very generous offer, Mrs. Ainsworth," I said, choosing my words carefully. I let her offer hang in the air for a moment, the silence stretching. It was generous on the surface, the kind of offer that just a few months ago I would have wept with gratitude for. But something fundamental had shifted within me in the last 24 hours. The scales had fallen from my eyes. "Mrs. Ainsworth," I began, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate the board's reconsideration, and I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me personally." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "However, as I mentioned when you called last night, I have already accepted another position." A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed her face, so quick I almost missed it. "Ah, yes, with Artisan Table Collective, I presume?" It wasn't a question. I neither confirmed nor denied. My new role begins on Monday. She studied me for a long moment, her gaze shrewd. "Anna, if this is about feeling slighted, I understand. Dean Finch's handling of the situation was regrettable. But surely, this offer demonstrates the Academy's commitment to making things right, to valuing you appropriately. With all due respect, Mrs. Wife Ainsworth," I said, meeting her gaze steadily, "this isn't just about a regrettable incident or an overdue salary adjustment. This is about a pattern of being undervalued, of having my contributions consistently minimized, of my legitimate requests for resources being dismissed year after year, while the Academy reaped the benefits of my department's success. I took a breath. The time to value an employee, Mrs. Ainsworth, is not when they have one foot out the door, or, in my case, when they've been unceremoniously kicked out and are fortunate enough to land on their feet elsewhere. Her expression didn't change, but I sensed a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. She knew I was right. The offer from Artisan Table, I continued, isn't just about a title or a salary, though those are, admittedly, significantly better. It's about an environment that fosters creativity, that invests in talent, that genuinely sees the value I bring before being forced to. It's about respect, Mrs. Ainsworth. Mutual respect. She was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. I understand your position, Anna, though I am, of course, deeply disappointed for the Crestwood. She sighed, a rare crack in her composed facade. Dean Finch is concerned that your departure, particularly to Artisan Table, might complicate our potential partnership with them. And there it was, the crux of it. Not my welfare, not even necessarily the Academy's long-term health, but the immediate, tangible fear of losing a lucrative deal. That would be a question for Artisan Table, wouldn't it? I replied carefully, maintaining my professional neutrality. She gave a small wry smile. Indeed, your discretion is noted, Anna. She stood, extending her hand. One last question, if I may. Out of professional curiosity, what could the Crestwood have done differently, truly differently, to retain you? The question was unexpected but welcome. I considered it for a moment, recognized my value before I had to look elsewhere to find it. I said simply, listen when your key people speak. Invest in them. Loyalty, Mrs. Ainsworth, works both ways. The Crestwood expected unwavering commitment from me while repeatedly demonstrating that I wasn't worth investing in. That creates an unsustainable imbalance. Eventually, something has to give. She held my gaze, then nodded again, more thoughtfully this time. A fair assessment, Miss Vance, a very fair assessment. She shook my hand. Thank you for your candor. Whatever your next steps, I wish you every success. Walking out of the Crestwood Academy for the second and final time, I felt lighter. Immeasurably lighter. This meeting hadn't been about giving them a second chance. It had been about giving me a chance to reclaim my narrative, to articulate my truth, to leave on my own terms, with my dignity and professional reputation intact. It was, in its own strange way, a gift, the gift of closure. Monday morning arrived with a mix of excitement and a healthy dose of nerves. My first official day at Artisan Table Collective. I arrived early, eager to settle in. Marcus had arranged for a small, bright office for me, a real office, with a door and a window overlooking the city, a far cry from the cramped, windowless cubbyhole I'd occupied at the Crestwood despite my seniority. There was a welcome basket on the desk, filled with artisanal coffees, local honey, and a beautifully bound notebook. Such a small gesture, yet it spoke volumes. At 9 a.m., Marcus stopped by to introduce me to my new team. 5 talented, enthusiastic marketing and R&D specialists who would be working under my direction. They were young, bright, full of ideas. The energy was infectious. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from managing a pastry program where I had to fight for every basic resource to leading a well-funded innovation department with a clear mandate to create excellence. Team, this is Anna Vance, our new Director of Pastry Innovation and Development, Marcus announced, his pride evident. Many of you already know of her exceptional work at the Crestwood. We are incredibly fortunate to have her expertise in-house now. After the introductions and a brief team meeting to outline initial priorities, which felt more like an exciting brainstorming session than a directive, Marcus asked me to join him in the main conference room. There, I found several members of Artisan Table's executive team gathered. The CFO, the Chief Marketing Officer, the Head of Operations. Anna, before you dive in completely, Marcus explained, we wanted your input on an important decision we're currently finalizing. The CFO, a sharp woman named Sarah Chen, spoke up. As you know, Anna, we're looking to significantly elevate our pastry offerings across all our outlets. We've been exploring a strategic partnership with an external culinary institution to assist with specialized training for our existing staff and potentially co-develop some foundational elements of our new pastry curriculum before your team is fully up and running. The Crestwood Academy is one of the institutions we've been in discussions with. My heart gave a little thump. Of course. The CMO added, their contract proposal is up for review this week. Given your recent and extensive first-hand knowledge of the Crestwood's capabilities and your deep understanding of our needs here at Artisan Table, we value your perspective immensely. The air in the room seemed to still. All eyes were on me. Here it was, the opportunity, the perfect, ethically sound, professionally unimpeachable way to, what? Revenge? I could have, so easily, painted a damning picture of the Crestwood. I could have highlighted their outdated equipment, their bureaucratic inertia, Dean Finch's lack of vision, the recent turmoil caused by my departure. I could have subtly steered them away, ensuring the Crestwood lost this potentially lucrative contract. No one would question it. Business relationships ended all the time. It would be swift, satisfying on some primal level, a clear message to Dean Finch. But as I looked around that table, at these smart, forward-thinking people who had placed their trust in me, who had valued me from the outset, I knew that wasn't who I was. Revenge might offer a fleeting, bitter satisfaction, but integrity and professionalism would serve me and Artisan Table far better in the long run. I took a careful breath. I believe, I said, choosing my words with precision, that the Crestwood, like any potential partner, should be evaluated on its current merits and its ability to meet Artisan Table's specific, forward-looking needs. Historically, their pastry program, under dedicated instruction, has produced strong graduates. I paused. However, consistency in leadership, adaptability to new trends, and the internal culture supporting innovation will be critical factors for you to consider for a long-term dynamic partnership. I didn't need to say more. I hadn't badmouthed anyone. I had simply stated professional truths. I had given them the framework to make their own informed decision. And in doing so, I had honored my own values and theirs. The email was sent at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, precisely 1 week after Dean Finch had so unceremoniously fired me. The timing wasn't orchestrated by me. It was simply when Artisan Table's executive team, after a final review of proposals from the Crestwood and 2 other, more nimble culinary arts programs, finalized their decision. Marcus, with characteristic transparency, had given me the courtesy of seeing the draft before it went out, though I had formally recused myself from the final vote to avoid any appearance of bias or impropriety. The message to Dean Finch was professional, direct, and unambiguous. Dear Dean Finch, it began. After careful consideration of our evolving brand strategy and digital requirements for pastry innovation and training, North Bay Solutions has decided to transition our strategic partnership discussions to Meridian Creative Arts Institute, effective immediately. This decision reflects our need for a partner with demonstrated agility in curriculum development and a strong focus on contemporary techniques. And then, the part that I knew would land like a lead weight on Dean Finch's polished mahogany desk. Anna Vance, our new Director of Pastry Innovation and Development, will oversee the strategic direction of our pastry program internally and will serve as your point of contact for any final, brief, transitional matters related to past informal discussions, should any arise. We appreciate the time the Crestwood invested in initial conversations and request any relevant, historical, non-proprietary materials discussed be forwarded to Anna's attention by end of business Friday for archival purposes only as we move forward with Meridian. I imagined his reaction, the initial confusion perhaps, then the rereading, the slow dawning realization. Not only had he lost me, his star player, the architect of the very program he'd hoped to leverage, but now he had definitively lost Artisan Table, a client that, by my rough estimation, could have represented a significant boost to the Crestwood's declining revenues. And the ultimate exquisite irony? I, Anna Vance, the employee he had dismissed for disloyalty, would be the one named as overseeing the new direction, the one to whom he was now instructed to forward any historical materials. The perfect professional revenge had fallen into my lap, not through any machination of my own, but as a natural consequence of his actions and their own institutional shortcomings. I hadn't needed to badmouth the Crestwood or sabotage the relationship. Their own inflexibility, their failure to keep pace, highlighted perhaps by the stark contrast my new role presented, had done that for them. Later that afternoon, I received a LinkedIn connection request from Mrs. Gable, the Crestwood's receptionist. I accepted, and a private message popped up almost immediately. Anna, the office is absolute chaos. Dean Finch has been in emergency meetings with the board via Zoom all day. He looks apoplectic. Word about Artisan Table choosing Meridian and your new role being mentioned in the email spread like wildfire. Liam told Chloe that at least 3 other senior instructors from different departments started updating their resumes this afternoon. Karma, as they say, works fast. So happy for you. I smiled, a small, quiet smile. There was no need to gloat, no need to reply immediately or insert myself into the Crestwood's internal affairs. Instead, I turned back to the schematics for the new R&D kitchen Marcus had just approved for me, a state-of-the-art facility that would be my creative playground. I heard whispers about the Crestwood. Things weren't going well. Enrollment continued to decline, especially in the pastry program, which had been its crown jewel. Dean Finch, apparently, was under increasing pressure from the board. Several more key faculty members had left. The shine had definitely worn off the old institution. It wasn't a source of joy for me, that news. Just a quiet affirmation that organizations that fail to value their people, that resist change and operate on ego rather than excellence, ultimately pay the price. Looking back on that journey, perhaps a year or so later, sitting in my beautiful, sunlit R&D kitchen, surrounded by the hum of creativity and the scent of baking, I realized something profound. Dean Finch, in his arrogance and short-sightedness, had inadvertently given me the most precious gift. The push I desperately needed but was too loyal, too entrenched to make for myself. He'd forced me out of a situation where I was slowly diminishing, where my spirit was being eroded by constant undervaluation. He'd propelled me into a place where I could truly flourish. The sting of that Tuesday morning had long since faded, replaced by a quiet gratitude. The path to finding my true worth hadn't been one I'd consciously chosen, but it was the one I was meant to be on. The desire for revenge, that initial flash of hurt and anger, had dissolved, because what I found instead was so much more fulfilling. It wasn't about seeing someone else fail. It was about building my own success, on my own terms, with integrity. It was about self-respect, and the quiet, unshakable courage to claim the recognition, the joy, and the sweet, sweet success that I, Anna Vance, truly deserved. Looking back, that cold dismissal wasn't an ending. It was an unceremonious shove towards a destiny I hadn't dared to dream of. The institution thought they were saving a few dollars, maintaining an old order. What they didn't realize is that true value, like a perfectly proofed dough, cannot be suppressed forever. It will rise. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you what you think you want, but it always gives you what you need to grow. My need was to understand that my worth wasn't tied to an institution or a title, but to the passion in my hands and the integrity in my heart. The sweetest revenge isn't about seeing others fall. It's about rising so high, on your own terms, that their shadows can no longer reach you. It's about finding your own recipe for happiness and baking it with all your might. If you've ever felt undervalued, if you've ever had your dedication met with indifference, please share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and in sharing, we find strength together. If this story resonated with you, if you found a piece of your own journey within mine, I invite you to subscribe to TK Revenge Story. We have many more paths of resilience and rebirth to walk together. And if you feel moved to support the channel, the super thanks button is always there. Sometimes, giving back in any way we can is part of our own healing recipe. Thank you for listening, and remember, always know your worth.